Before we dive into this chapter, please note that this is the YouTube censored version of the story, edited to meet platform guidelines. If you're looking for the full, uncut experience, including all the raw, explicit heat exactly as written, you can find the completely uncensored versions of every chapter over on my Patreon. The link is waiting for you in the description and in the pinned comment below. Now, with that said, let's step into the story. Chapter 1. My head felt like someone had driven a rusty nail straight through my temples. I couldn't even open my eyes without a sharp wave of nausea hitting the back of my throat. I groaned, rolling over on a mattress that felt far too large and far too soft to belong to me. The fabric beneath my fingers was silk, smooth and freezing cold against my skin. I reached out blindly, searching for a blanket or a familiar wall, but my hand just kept sliding across the empty, freezing sheet. Where the hell was I? Ding. System initialization complete. Welcome, host Jiang Yuan, to World 1. The voice didn't come from the room. It echoed directly inside my skull, sharp and clear, making my headache shoot to a whole new level of agony. Current mission: survive the paranoid Overlord, Gujinha. Warning: the target is highly unstable and prone to violent outbursts. If your survival meter drops to 0, your soul will be wiped from existence. I froze. My eyes snapped open, ignoring the throbbing pain behind my eyelids. The ceiling above me was dark and carved with expensive patterns that looked like they belonged in some billionaire's mansion. I wasn't in my apartment. I was stuck in a quick transmigration world, and my target was a certified psychopath. Great. I muttered under my breath, my throat dry as sandpaper. Just great. I forced myself to sit up, the silk blanket slipping down to my waist. My skin was tingling from the sudden chill of the room. I needed to find my clothes, get my bearings, and figure out how to handle a paranoid overlord before he decided to chop me into pieces. I turned my head to look at the other side of the bed, expecting it to be empty since the sheets were so cold. Instead, I found myself looking right at a man. He was sitting cross-legged on the edge of the mattress, just a few feet away from me. He was huge. Even sitting down, his shoulders were incredibly broad, and his chest looked like it was carved out of solid marble. He had dark hair that fell messily into his eyes, and a sharp, dangerous jawline. This had to be Gujinha. The man looked like he could snap my neck with 2 fingers. I braced myself, my heart hammering against my ribs. I waited for the glare, the cold words, or the immediate threat to my life that the system had promised. But nothing happened. Gujinha wasn't glaring at all. He was staring at me with his eyes wide open, blinking slowly. His expression wasn't terrifying or cruel. It looked blank, innocent, and deeply confused. He looked like a lost puppy that had suddenly been dropped into a strange room and didn't know how he got there. We sat there in silence for a few seconds, just looking at each other. Who? Genia started, his voice cracking slightly. He swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling as he stared at me. Who am I? And who are you? My mind went entirely blank. I blinked, looking at him, then looking up at the ceiling as if I could see the system floating there. System, I thought frantically. What is going on? You said he was a paranoid tyrant. Why does he look like he doesn't even know his own name? Ding. Scanning target. Scan complete. Due to a recent assassination attempt, the target has suffered severe head trauma resulting in temporary amnesia. He currently possesses no memories of his past, his personality, or his relationship with you. A sudden wave of relief washed over me, so strong that I almost laughed out loud. He had amnesia. The terrifying, dangerous overlord couldn't remember a single thing. If he didn't know who he was, then he didn't know who I was either. He didn't know I was a captive, or a pawn, or whatever unfortunate role I was supposed to play in this world. This was my chance to live. I looked back at Genia. He was still watching me, his eyes tracking every little movement I made. His hands were clutching the edge of the silk sheet so tightly that his knuckles were white. He was trembling. This man, who apparently ruled an entire empire with an iron fist, was genuinely terrified because his mind was a complete blank. You don't remember? I asked, keeping my voice soft, gentle, and deliberate. Genia shook his head slowly. He reached up, touching a thick, white bandage wrapped around the side of his head. My head hurts. Everything is dark. I don't know anything. He looked down at his own hands, then looked back up at me, his gaze locking onto my face. But when I woke up, I was looking at you. You were sleeping. I shifted on the bed, sliding closer to him. The silk blanket pulled around my hips. I knew what I looked like. I knew that my body was built to be appealing, and right now, my life depended on making this man fall in love with me before his real, terrifying personality woke back up. I had to become his absolute anchor. Don't worry, I whispered, reaching out to touch his arm. His skin was burning hot compared to the cold bed. He flinched slightly when my fingers made contact, but he didn't pull away. In fact, his eyes widened even more, tracking my hand as I slid it up his forearm. I know who you are. And I know who I am to you. Tell me, Genia begged. He leaned toward me just an inch, his breath coming a little faster. His scent, thick in the air, made my own pulse quicken. It wasn't a scary smell. It was warm and demanding, wrapping around me until it was hard to think straight. You are Genia, I said, putting on my best, most comforting smile. I let my voice drop into a soft, soothing rhythm, the kind of tone you use to calm a wild animal. And you are my husband. We are married, Genia. You love me more than anything in the world, and I take care of you. Genia's breath caught in his throat. Husband? He repeated, the words sounding strange on his tongue. He looked at my face, searching my eyes for any sign of a lie. But I was a professional. I kept my gaze steady, full of warmth and deep affection, letting him see exactly what he wanted to see. Yes, I lied softly, stepping into my role. We were in a terrible accident. Someone tried to hurt you because they were jealous of your success. But you're safe now. I'm right here. I will always take care of you. I didn't give him time to question it. I leaned forward, sliding my arms around his neck. I pulled my body close to his, pressing against his broad, muscular front. He was so much bigger than me that I felt engulfed by him, swallowed up by his heat and his scent. The moment I wrapped my arms around him, Genia let out a ragged, trembling sigh. His whole body relaxed against mine, his forehead dropping heavily onto my shoulder. He gripped my waist with both hands, his fingers digging into my skin. I didn't care about the tight grip. I just held him tighter, running my fingers through his messy dark hair, whispering sweet, comforting nonsense into his ear. It's okay, Genia. I've got you. Your husband is here, I murmured, rubbing his back in slow, steady circles. He was breathing heavily against my neck, his hot breath puffing over my skin. The scent in the room was filling my senses until my own head started to spin, not from the headache anymore, but from the sheer intensity of his physical presence. He was clinging to me like a drowning man clings to a piece of wood in the middle of the ocean. He didn't have a past, a name, or a purpose. All he had was me. You're my husband, Genia muttered against my skin, his voice deep and rough. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself, trying to hammer the fact into his brain. You belong to me. I belong to you. Yes, I whispered back, pulling away just enough to look at him. We belong to each other. When I looked into his eyes this time, the innocence was still there, but something else was starting to mix into it. A dark, intense focus was sparking in his pupils. He looked down at my lips, his chest heaving as he breathed in my scent. The fear in his body was turning into something entirely different, something much more volatile and dangerous. If you're my husband, Genia whispered, his grip on my waist tightening until I could barely breathe, then show me. Make me remember. Before I could even think of a response, he leaned in and pressed his mouth firmly against mine. The kiss was entirely chaotic. It wasn't gentle, and it wasn't practiced. It was born out of his pure desperation and my own sudden panic. He didn't know how to kiss me softly. He just knew he needed to hold on to me, to taste the only thing in the world that made him feel real. He bit down on my lower lip, hard enough that I let out a sharp gasp. The taste of salt, sweat, and fear mixed between us as he pushed deeper, taking over the kiss. A sudden, overwhelming heat flared up in my lower belly, catching me off guard. My heart raced, my hands gripping his shoulders as he pulled me down onto the bed, trapping my body beneath his weight. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but hold on to him as he kissed me over and over, his hands holding me close. Outside the doors of the master bedroom, the rest of the mansion was dead silent. The long, carpeted hallways were empty, stretching out into the dark corners of the estate. Downstairs, in the main security office, the computer screens flickered with live camera feeds from around the property, showing nothing but static security guards standing at the gates. An old butler in a spotless black suit stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, his hands clasped firmly behind his back. His face was a mask of professional calm, but his eyes were tightly fixed on the upper floor. He knew exactly what had happened the night before. He knew about the ambush and the secret medical team that had been rushed into the house under the cover of darkness. The house was waiting. The entire empire of the Gu family was hanging by a single thread, and everyone in the building knew that if the man in that bedroom didn't wake up whole, the world outside those gates would tear itself apart to consume what was left. Inside the bedroom, the world had shrunk down to the space between our bodies. Genia finally pulled back from the kiss, his breathing ragged. He was panting, his dark eyes cloudy and heavy with a deep, intense heat. His chest was pressed firmly against mine, trapping the air in my lungs. He looked down at me, his fingers tracing the shape of my jaw with a roughness that made me shiver. You're real, he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and intensity. You feel like everything I need. I lay beneath him, my skin flushed and my breathing just as uneven as his. My survival instinct was screaming at me to keep going, to play this hand until I had him under my thumb. I shifted slightly, letting my body press closer to his, my eyes looking up at him with absolute, unconditional surrender. I'm yours, Genia. I lied, my voice soft and deliberate. I've always been yours. Chapter 2. Genia didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his thumbs rubbing hard against my cheekbones while his chest heaved. I could feel the heat radiating off him, thick and demanding. Even though his mind was a blank slate, the way he looked at me wasn't soft. It was the look of a man who had found his only possession in a world of nothingness and intended to hold on to it at all costs. I swallowed, keeping my expression vulnerable. I needed him to believe I was his only light, his only anchor. If he felt even a second of doubt, I was dead. Don't leave me, he rasped, his voice sounding like it had been dragged over gravel. He didn't wait for an answer before burying his face in the crook of my neck, holding me close as if he were trying to pull my entire being into his. I don't know who I am, but I know you. I can't let you go. I wrapped my arms around his back, feeling the steady strength under his skin. I'm not going anywhere, I whispered, my fingers tracing his spine. But you're covered in sweat and your bandage is messy. We should get you cleaned up, Genia. It'll help you feel more like yourself. He pulled back, his eyes narrowing slightly. For a moment, a flicker of that famous paranoia crossed his face, a shadow of the man he used to be. Will you stay with me? Of course, I said, giving him a small, reassuring smile. Every second. I led him toward the bathroom, my hand firmly tucked into his. He followed me without question, though his grip on my fingers was tight enough to bruise. He walked like a man who expected the floor to disappear at any moment, his eyes darting to every corner of the room, yet always returning to me. It was clear that even without his memories, his instinct was to protect and possess. The bathroom was an expanse of white marble and gold fixtures. A circular tub sat in the center, already steaming. I didn't bother checking how the water had been prepared, I just focused on Genia. I reached up and began to unwrap the bandage around his head. He stood perfectly still, his eyes locked on mine as the white cloth fell away. The wound on his temple was prominent, a dark, jagged line, but it was healing. Does it hurt? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Only when you're not looking at me, he replied. The honesty in his voice was intense. He was becoming attached to me at a rate that the system hadn't even warned me about. I reached for the hem of the loose pants he was wearing and paused, looking up for permission. He didn't blink. He just raised his arms slightly, letting me help him strip down until he was ready to step into the water. Seeing him fully for the first time was striking. His build was incredibly strong, broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and athletic legs. His skin was bronze, stretched tight over lean muscle. I felt a surge of his cologne hit me again, a scent like cedar and warm skin that left me briefly breathless. I helped him into the tub, the hot water splashing over the sides. I sat on the edge, grabbing a sponge and a bottle of expensive-smelling oil. Lean back, I told him. He obeyed, his head resting against the marble rim. His eyes never closed. He watched me as I lathered the sponge, the soap bubbles white against his skin. I started with his shoulders, rubbing in slow, methodical circles. The friction of the sponge and the slick oil made his skin gleam under the lights. Genia let out a low sigh, his head lolling to the side. That feels right. You used to love it when I did this. I lied, my voice smooth. I moved the sponge down his chest, over the hard planes of his torso. Every time I touched him, his muscles tensed slightly. He was incredibly responsive, his body reacting to me even if his mind couldn't remember why. I poured more water over his shoulders, the steam rising around us. The air in the bathroom was getting thick, the humidity making my hair curl and my skin damp. I could feel his gaze burning into me, tracing the movement of my hands. Yuan, he said suddenly. He had shortened my name already. Why are you so beautiful? I paused, the sponge resting over his heart. I could feel it thumping against my palm, fast and rhythmic. I'm just your husband, Genia. He reached out, his hand dripping with water, and grabbed the back of my neck. He pulled me forward until my face was inches from his. The smell of the soapy water was making my head swim. No, he muttered, his thumb tracing my bottom lip. You're more than that. You're the only thing that isn't dark. When I look at you, the noise in my head stops. His intensity was a trap. I could see the obsession taking root, tying his thoughts to me. He didn't just want me. He needed me to navigate this blank world. I leaned into his touch, letting my eyes flutter shut. Then let me take the noise away, I whispered. I moved the sponge lower, dipping it under the surface of the water. The friction of my skin against his, the slickness of the soap, and the heat of the room were all building into an incredibly charged atmosphere. Jinya's breathing hitched, his fingers tightening against my neck. Suddenly, he wasn't content to just sit there. He lunged upward, his hands grabbing my waist and lifting me off the edge of the tub. I let out a gasp of surprise as he pulled me straight into the water with him. I landed on his lap, my legs straddling his hips, our clothes soaking wet and clinging instantly to our skin. The water was hot, but his skin was hotter. Jinya. I gasped, my hands landing on his wet shoulders to steady myself as the saturated fabric of my shirt stuck firmly to my chest. He didn't listen. He pinned me against the back edge of the tub, his body pressing firmly against mine. The marble was cold against my spine, but the front of my body was enveloped by his heat. He looked at me with a hunger that was no longer innocent. It was fiercely predatory. I can't wait, he growled. I don't care about the memories. I want you now. He smashed his lips against mine, his tongue invading my mouth with a desperate force. His hands roamed over my back, pulling me so close that our wet clothes felt like a second skin between us. I felt the power in his grip, the way he dominated the space effortlessly. My survival meter was probably ticking up, but my heart was doing something entirely different. I wrapped my arms tightly around his neck, pulling him into the kiss, answering his intense hunger with my own. The friction of our wet clothing, the sound of the water splashing against the tiles, and our ragged gasps for air filled the room. Jinya was losing his restraint, his lips grazing my neck, marking my skin fiercely as he claimed me in the steam. While the room filled with mist, the butler downstairs was no longer alone. A young man with slicked back hair and a sharp, expensive suit stood in the foyer. He was tapping a gold pin against his chin, his eyes cold and calculating. This was Lin Xiao, Jinya's cousin, and the man who had been waiting for the Overlord to fall so he could take the crown. He's awake, Lin Xiao asked, his voice thin and unpleasant. He is, Master Lin. The butler replied, his voice neutral. And the little bird? Is he still in there? Mr. Jiang has not left the master's side. Lin Xiao smirked, a cruel glint in his eyes. Good. Let them have their fun. A man who relies on a canary to keep his sanity isn't a man who can run an empire. I'll give them an hour. Then I'll go up and see just how much of my dear cousin is left. He turned on his heel, his shoes clicking loudly on the marble floor. He didn't see the way the butler's eyes narrowed as he watched him walk away. Back in the tub, Jinya had me pinned so tightly I could feel the individual beats of his heart against my ribs through our soaked shirts. He had moved from my mouth to my shoulder, his lips leaving dark, stinging marks that burned in the hot water. You're mine, he whispered against my skin. Say it. I arched my neck, my fingers clenching in his damp hair. I was trapped in the steam, trapped in his arms, and trapped in a game I absolutely had to win. I'm yours. I choked out, the words feeling far too real as the heat of his body pressed through our wet clothes. Only yours, Jinya. He let out a low, rough growl and pulled me back into another bruising, desperate kiss, holding my body flush against his as the world outside faded into the mist. Chapter 3. The water in the tub eventually grew lukewarm, but the heat between our bodies hadn't faded at all. Jinya finally let me up, his dark eyes tracking every drop of water that slid down my chest as we dried off and dressed. I managed to find a soft, oversized sweater and trousers in the wide closet, while Jinya threw on a dark silk robe that made him look effortlessly imposing, even with a fresh bandage taped over his temple. As I combed through his damp hair, a sudden, urgent chime rang inside my head. Ding. Plot update. Warning. Key characters are approaching. Host must prepare to maintain the established background role. I paused, the comb resting against Jinya's scalp. System, I thought sharply. Explain something to me. How exactly did I get into this world? Was there another Jiang Yuanyuan here before me? Or did you just drop my actual body into Jinya's bed? Replying to host. Your original soul and body were transmigrated directly into this world space. To ensure full integration, the system executed a worldwide reality rewrite. Every citizen, database, and legal record now recognizes Jiang Yuanyuan as Gu Jinya's legally wedded husband. To the world, you are the beautiful, coddled canary he married in secret a year ago. So Lin Xiao, the butler, the board directors, they all think I've been living here this whole time? Correct. To them, you are a gold-digging outsider who managed to ensnare the cold Overlord. Your existence is strongly hated by his family, making you the perfect target. Good luck, host. I swallowed hard, placing the comb down. So I wasn't just acting. I had an entire fake history to defend. Yuan, Jinya murmured, noticing my sudden stillness. He reached up, his hand wrapping tightly around my wrist to pull me down until I was sitting on his lap. He leaned his face into my neck, breathing in the scent of the bath soap. What's wrong? You look scared. I'm not scared, I lied, turning around to face him. I cupped his jaw, playing the part of the devoted, worried spouse. I'm just worried about you. Your family, they aren't very nice. They might try to use your accident against you. Before Genia could ask what I meant, a loud knock rattled the bedroom door. The handle turned immediately without waiting for an invitation, and the door swung open. Lin Xiao stepped into the room, a smug, oily smile plastered across his face. He didn't look like a man visiting a sick relative. He looked like a vulture checking on a carcass. Behind him, the old butler stood with a strained, helpless expression. Brother Genia, Lin Xiao said, his voice dripping with fake concern. I heard you finally woke up. The board of directors has been frantic. They're saying you were practically a vegetable after the crash. Genia didn't answer. He sat perfectly still on the edge of the bed, his face blank. His grip on my waist tightened instantly, his knuckles turning white beneath his robe. I could feel the tension radiating off him. Without his memories, he had no idea who this man was, but his natural paranoia was already telling him that Lin Xiao was an enemy. Lin Xiao's eyes slid away from Genia and landed directly on me. His smile turned into a sneer, full of disgust and mockery. And of course, the little gold digger is still clinging to you, Lin Xiao mocked, taking a step closer. Tell me, Jiang Yuan, did you think you could just hide him away in this bedroom forever? The whole company is in chaos. We need to know if the great CEO Gu is actually fit to run the empire, or if his brain is scrambled. He was trying to provoke a reaction. He wanted to see if Genia would snap, or worse, show signs of confusion. I didn't give him the chance. Before Lin Xiao could take another step toward the bed, I slid off Genia's lap and stood up, placing my body directly between them. I forced my shoulders to tremble slightly, letting my eyes fill with quick, unshed tears, but I kept my voice sharp and defensive. Master Lin, have you no shame? I cried out, my voice shaking with a perfect mix of fear and indignation. I grabbed the edges of my sweater, looking like a fragile, terrified spouse who was risking everything to protect his sick husband. Genia just survived a horrific assassination attempt. He is exhausted, recovering, and you dare to come into our private bedroom, throwing around insults and demands. Lin Xiao blinked, caught off guard by my sudden outburst. You, the board directors? I cut him off, stepping forward to force him back toward the door. The only reason the board is in chaos is because snakes like you are whispering rumors in their ears. You don't care about the company, Master Lin. You just want to catch Genia at his weakest, because you know you could never match him when he's whole. Shut your mouth, you little trash. Lin Xiao snarled, his face turning red with anger. He raised a hand, his fingers clenching into a fist as if he wanted to strike me. You're just a toy he bought to amuse himself. You have no right to speak to me like this. The moment Lin Xiao raised his hand, the air in the room froze. From behind me, a low, menacing sound rumbled from Genia's throat. He stood up from the bed slowly, his dark robe billowing around his ankles. Even without a single memory of his past power, his dormant protective instincts had been triggered by my tears. Seeing someone threaten his only possession drove him into a quiet, terrifying rage. Genia walked up behind me, his chest pressing against my back as he wrapped one hand around my waist, pulling me securely against him. His other hand reached out and grabbed Lin Xiao's raised wrist. The sound of bones shifting under an unforgiving grip echoed in the quiet room. Let go. Genia, you're breaking it. Lin Xiao screamed, his knees buckling from the sudden, excruciating pain. The smugness vanished from his face, replaced by pure terror. Genia didn't say a word. He just stared down at his cousin with cold, murderous eyes, his grip tightening, until Lin Xiao was whimpering on the floor. Get out, I whispered softly, playing the fragile victim perfectly. I leaned back into Genia's chest, letting out a soft sob. Genia, please, make him leave. He frightens me. Hearing my voice break, Genia didn't hesitate. He threw Lin Xiao's hand away with enough force to send the man sprawling into the hallway. The butler quickly stepped forward, closing the bedroom doors shut and locking out the cousin's painful groans. The moment the doors clicked shut, the silence returned. But Genia wasn't calm. He spun me around roughly, his hands gripping my shoulders. His breathing was fast and shallow, his dark eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and intense jealousy. He looked at you, Genia muttered, his voice dropping into a dark, dangerous register. He dared to raise his hand to you. He called you a toy. Genia, it's okay, I'm fine. No, he roared softly, dragging me across the room toward the dark wood-studded desk by the window. He swept his arm across the surface, sending papers and pens flying to the floor with a loud crash. Before I could even process what was happening, Jinya lifted me up and slammed me down onto the edge of the desk. He leaned in instantly, his body pinning me flat against the smooth wood. His hands were frantic, tearing at the collar of my sweater until the soft fabric separated, exposing my flushed chest to the cool air of the room. "You are mine," Jinya growled against my lips, his hands gripping my thighs and forcing them wide apart around his waist. "He doesn't get to look at you. No one gets to touch you. I'll destroy them all." He didn't give me a chance to speak. He slammed his mouth down on mine, a jealous, frantic kiss that tasted of hot anger and absolute dominance, reasserting his claim over my body right there on the cold wood as he pulled me into his tight hold. Chapter 4. The wood of the desk was unyielding beneath me, a stark contrast to the absolute heat of Jinya's body pinning me down. By the time he finally let my lips go, my breath came in short, ragged gasps, and the skin around my neck and collarbone was stinging from the fresh love bites he had left behind. He lingered there for a long time, his forehead resting against mine, his chest rising and falling in a shaky rhythm until his frantic pulse finally began to calm. Eventually, the panic of his jealousy faded back into exhaustion. The physical toll of the assassination attempt and the confrontation with Lin Xiao caught up to him. He carried me back to the bed, refusing to detach himself from me for even a second. The moment his head hit the pillow, he pulled me flush against his side, burying his face into my shoulder, and drifted into a deep sleep. I lay awake in the dark room, listening to the steady sound of his breathing. My neck throbbed where his teeth had grazed me. I carefully reached up, my fingertips brushing over the sensitive marks. "System," I called out in my mind, keeping my thoughts focused. "Give me the data on Lin Xiao, and I need to know more about what happened before the memory loss." Ding. Retrieving data for host. The voice chimed softly in my head. "Lin Xiao has been skimming funds from the Gu Group shipping lines for 3 years. Gu Jinya discovered the discrepancies right before the crash. The assassination attempt wasn't just a random attack. It was orchestrated to stop Jinya from presenting the evidence to the board of directors. If Jinya doesn't recover his files and present them at the upcoming gala, Lin Xiao will successfully frame Jinya for the financial fraud." I frowned, looking down at the sleeping man beside me. His features were relaxed now, devoid of the sharp, predatory edge he carried when he was awake. "Where are the files hidden?" "The encrypted data is stored in a secure drive inside Jinya's private office at the company headquarters. However, only Jinya knows the biometrics and the specific passcode to access it." A knot tightened in my stomach. To save my own skin, I had to fix this company mess, which meant I needed Jinya to cooperate without realizing he was playing right into a trap. I was dealing with a blank slate who thought I was his entire universe, while a pack of wolves waited right outside the bedroom door. Suddenly, the man beside me stiffened. Jinya's breathing fractured. A low, pained groan escaped his throat, and his fingers dug into the mattress, tearing at the sheets. His eyes remained shut, but his jaw was clenched so tightly the muscles jumped. He began to thrash, his head shaking from side to side as a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. "No," he muttered, his voice thick with agony. "Get back. The fire. Don't look." He was having a nightmare. Without his conscious mind to suppress the trauma of the crash, the memories were bleeding into his sleep, torturing him. "Jinya," I whispered, turning my body toward him. I placed my hands on his cheeks, trying to anchor him. "Jinya, wake up. It's just a dream." His eyes snapped open. They were bloodshot, wild, and unseeing. For a split second, the sheer, unadulterated coldness of the true Overlord stared back at me, a gaze so lethal it made my breath hitch. But as his vision focused on my face in the dim light, the terrifying edge crumbled. The paranoia remained, but it turned into an agonizing, desperate need. He lunged forward, throwing his arms around my waist and pulling me down onto him. He held me so tightly I could feel the frantic, erratic hammering of his heart right against my ribs. He hid his face in my chest, his broad shoulders trembling. He was clinging to me like a man falling off a cliff, using every ounce of his strength just to keep me pressed against his skin. Yuan, don't go," he choked out, his voice cracked with a vulnerability that shook me to the core. Everything was burning. There was blood everywhere, and I couldn't find you. I couldn't find my way back to you. Hearing this ruthless tyrant speak with such devastating fear made something shift inside me. I had been telling myself that this was just a game, a calculation to keep my survival meter from dropping to zero. But looking at him now, feeling the genuine terror in his touch, the line between my acting and real affection began to blur. My heart ached for him. It was a strange, unexpected pang of emotion that had nothing to do with the system. I reached up, gently smoothing his damp hair away from his forehead, avoiding the bandage. "I'm here," I cooed softly into his ear, my voice trembling slightly with genuine warmth. I'm right here, Genia. The fire is gone. You found me. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. Swear it, he demanded, pulling back just enough to look into my eyes. His gaze was intense, begging for a truth he could hold on to in the dark. Swear you won't leave me when I'm like this. I feel like I'm losing my mind, Yuan. You're the only thing that keeps me anchored. I swear, I whispered, my heart thumping against my ribs. I leaned down, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to his temple, right beside his wound, before sliding my lips down to his jaw. I am yours. Yours. The emotion in the air seemed to shift the atmosphere entirely. The fear in his eyes melted into a profound, reverent heat. He didn't slam his mouth into mine this time. There was no aggressive fury, no jealous frenzy. Instead, he reached out, his long fingers trembling slightly as they intertwined with mine, pinning our hands together against the mattress. He leaned up and kissed me with a tenderness that made my soul ache. His lips parted mine gently, as if he were worshipping something sacred. A low, shaky sigh escaped his chest, vibrating against my mouth. He shifted his weight, moving over me with absolute care. Every touch was deliberate, every movement full of an overwhelming love that felt far too real to be part of a script. His free hand slid down my side, his palm warm against my skin, tracing my hip with a slow, worshipful friction that made my skin tingle. Yuan, he murmured against my lips, his breath warm and uneven. My beautiful love. I let out a soft gasp as he pressed deeper against me, our fingers remaining tightly locked together. In the quiet darkness of the room, every movement was amplified, the sound of our skin sliding together, the emotional sighs that echoed between us, and the steady, unyielding rhythm of his body holding mine close. He moved with a reverence that made me feel entirely cherished, his gaze locked onto my face even in the shadows, watching every flicker of comfort that crossed my features. I arched into his touch, my walls crumbling as I gave in to the romance of the moment, losing myself entirely in the arms of the Overlord who held me safely against his chest until the shadows of his nightmare finally dissolved into the quiet night. Chapter 5. By the time the sun came up, our bodies were still tangled in the sheets, our fingers loosely locked together. The bedroom was quiet, filled only with our soft, synchronized breathing. Genia was looking down at me, his eyes clear and full of a quiet warmth that made me forget, just for a second, that this entire life was a creation of the system. He pressed one final, lingering kiss against my forehead, sealing the unspoken promises we had made in the dark. But reality didn't give us long to rest. 2 days later, the night of the high society gala arrived. It was the exact event Lin Xiao was planning to use to ruin us. Genia needed to appear before the board of directors to show everyone he was perfectly fine. I had spent 48 hours making sure he memorized the names of the key board members, guiding him through his own life like a shadow. He didn't care about the company or the millions at stake. He only agreed to go because I told him it would keep the people who tried to hurt him away from us. When we arrived at the grand ballroom, the doors opened to a sea of flashing cameras and whispers. Genia wore a tailored black tuxedo that fit his frame flawlessly, making him look just as cold and imposing as the day he lost his memory. I stood right by his side, my hand resting on his forearm. He kept his arm pressed firmly against his side, trapping my hand there so I couldn't move away from him even an inch. Just remember to nod and look distant if anyone asks about the specific shipping logs, I murmured under my breath as we walked down the steps. I'll handle the talking. I don't care about them, Genia replied, his voice flat as he stared straight ahead. I only want to leave. Soon, I promised, giving his arm a gentle squeeze. We were making our way toward the older board members when the crowd near the center of the room parted. A man walked out from the circle of executives, holding a glass of champagne. He was incredibly elegant, dressed in a white suit with silver embroidery, his movements smooth and practiced. He had a pale, classic beauty that made him look like a piece of porcelain. My heart dropped. I didn't need the system to tell me who this was. Genia, the man said, his voice smooth and clear. He ignored me, his eyes locking onto Genia with a mixture of intense longing and familiarity. I came back the moment I heard about the crash. You didn't answer any of my calls. Ding. Character alert. Song Ran, the true white light. He is Gu Genia's former fiancé and the son of the second largest shareholder in the Gu Group. They were together for 3 years before Genia suddenly broke it off to marry you. Genia didn't blink. He stared at Song Ran with total indifference. Without his memories, Song Ran was a complete stranger. Who are you? Song Ran's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered, taking a step closer. He reached out as if to touch Genia's shoulder, his eyes softening. Genia, don't play games like that. I know you're angry about how we parted before I went abroad, but you can't pretend you forgot our summers in France. You can't forget the melody we used to play together on the piano. You always said that song belonged to us. Song Ran shifted his gaze to me, his eyes turning cold and sharp, filled with a quiet superiority. And I see you brought your companion. Genia, you don't have to keep using substitutes to punish me. I'm back now. We can fix this. A cold spike of insecurity slammed into my chest. Substitutes. The word tasted like poison. I looked up at Genia, my chest tightening. Song Ran knew things I didn't. He shared a past, real memories, and a history with the true, cold Overlord. I was just a rewritten character, a canary playing a role in a script. If Genia's mind suddenly clicked, if those old memories returned right now, he would realize I had been lying to him from the very second he woke up. He would see me as a fraud. Genia felt me stiffen. He looked down at me, noticing the way my smile had vanished and how my fingers were trembling against his tuxedo sleeve. He didn't look at Song Ran at all. He just reached over and placed his hand over mine, locking my fingers in a grip that was almost painful. I don't know any song, Genia said to Song Ran, his voice turning incredibly sharp and dangerous. And if you look at my husband like that again, I will have the guards throw you out of this building. Song Ran gasped, his face turning pale. But the fear inside me didn't stop. The panic was roaring in my ears. I couldn't stand the way the people around us were looking at me, whispering that I was just a temporary distraction compared to the elegant man in white. I needed to bind Genia to me. I needed to remind myself, and him, that he belonged to me right now, no matter what his past looked like. I grabbed Genia's hand, my grip tight and desperate. Genia, come with me. Right now. I dragged him away from the center of the ballroom, ignoring Song Ran's stunned expression. I pushed through the glass doors at the side of the hall, pulling him out onto the dark VIP balcony. The night air was cool, but I was burning up. The balcony was shielded from the ballroom by the velvet curtains that blocked out the light, leaving us in the shadows while the muffled chatter of the crowd continued just a few meters away. The moment the curtains fell shut behind us, I spun around and slammed my body into his. Yuan, Genia muttered, surprised by my sudden force. I didn't let him speak. I reached up, grabbing his silk tie and pulling him down into a fierce, ruthless kiss. It was frantic and full of an intense, biting insecurity. I bit his lower lip until I heard him let out a low groan, my tongue sliding into his mouth to claim him with a desperation I couldn't control. I wanted to erase Song Ran from his mind. I wanted to erase France, the piano, and every single memory he had ever made before he met me. You're mine. I breathed against his lips, my hands running down his chest, parting the front of his vest to feel the desperate heat of his skin. Tell me you don't know him. Tell me I'm the only one. Genia's eyes darkened in the shadows, his breathing turning into a ragged growl. The vulnerability of my jealousy drove him insane. He grabbed my waist, lifting me up until my back was pressed against the cold stone railing of the balcony. I don't care about him, Genia rasped, his hands gripping my thighs, pulling me flush against his frame. I don't care about anyone but you. You're my husband. You're the only thing I see. I didn't wait. Driven by pure fear of losing him, I wrapped my legs tightly around his waist, pulling him in. The intensity between us was blinding. I bit my own wrist to stifle a sharp cry, my tears leaking into the fabric of his tuxedo as he held me with a desperate, territorial force. He claimed my space entirely, his body shaking with the absolute need to prove that he was mine, binding his soul to mine in the dark while the world outside continued to dance. His movements became a frantic blur of speed, his hands leaving imprints on my hips. He held me flush against the cold stone as his breath came in ragged, hyperventilating grunts. With a final, violent wave of emotion, his body stiffened, a groan vibrating against my chest as we surrendered entirely to the overwhelming heat between us, our hearts beating as one in the shadows while the world outside continued to dance. Chapter 6. We made it back to the mansion long after midnight. My skin was covered in hidden dark marks under my clothes, stinging reminders of how frantically Genia had claimed me on that stone balcony. As soon as the bedroom door shut, Genia collapsed onto the bed, drained. The effort of acting like the functional, terrifying CEO in public, combined with the explosive release of his emotions on the balcony, had pushed his recovering body to its absolute limit. I changed into a loose shirt and slid under the covers beside him. He reached out automatically in his sleep, his hand gripping my hip to keep me close, but his touch felt weak. I closed my eyes, hoping the worst of the night was behind us. A few hours later, a sharp, choked groan broke the silence. I snapped awake. Genia was thrashing beside me, his fingers tearing at his own hair. He was shaking, a cold sweat breaking across his forehead. He clutched his temples, his breath coming in jagged, agonizing gasps. Jinya. I sat up quickly, reaching out to touch his arm. Jinya, look at me. Is it your head? Get out, he rasped, his eyes flying open in the dark room. I froze. His voice didn't sound like the innocent, dependent man who had spent the last few days clinging to me. It was ice cold, sharp, and empty of any warmth. Ding. Warning. Warning. Target's brain activity is surging. The suppressed memories of the original timeline are forcing their way to the surface. The dual personalities are clashing. System, what do you mean? I asked frantically in my mind. You rewrote reality. Clarification. The worldwide reality rewrite changed everyone's memories except Gu Jinya's deep subconscious. The original Gu Jinya knew he had no husband. As his real identity wakes up, he is remembering the truth. Jiang Yuanyuan did not exist in his life before the crash. He is realizing you are an anomaly, an uninvited stranger who took advantage of his amnesia to play the role of his spouse. My heart stopped. I looked down at Jinya. The confusion on his face was melting away, replaced by a dark, terrifying clarity. He stared up at me, his jaw clenching so hard the bone looked ready to snap. The innocent husband who loved me so tenderly was actively slipping away right in front of my eyes. The cold, ruthless Overlord was tearing his way out of the prison of his mind. Who are you? Jinya muttered, his voice dropping into a low, predatory register. He reached up, his fingers wrapping around my throat. He didn't squeeze to choke me, but the grip was firm, unyielding, and dominant. You're not my husband. I don't know you. I remember my life. I remember the crash, but I don't remember you. I choked on my breath, my hands coming up to rest on his wrists. Fear flooded my veins, but my survival instinct roared to life. I couldn't run. If I acted guilty, he would destroy me right here. I had to lean into my vulnerability. I had to let him see that even if I was a lie, my body and my submission belonged entirely to him. Jinya, I whispered, forcing my eyes to fill with tears, letting them spill over my cheeks and wet his fingers. It's me. Look at me. I am looking at you, he growled, his grip on my neck tightening just a fraction as he rolled over, pinning me flat against the mattress. His dark eyes were shifting, flashing between the desperate man who needed me and the monster who wanted to crush me. You lied to me. You sat in my bed, touched my body, and told me we belonged to each other. You used my broken mind to crawl into my house. You're just a beautiful, deceitful fraud. Then punish me. I choked out, arching my back against the sheets, offering my bare throat to him entirely. I didn't fight his grip. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling his body down until his chest crushed mine. If I'm a fraud, Jinya, why does your body know me? Why did you hold me like I was your entire world on that balcony? His eyes flared with a dark, dangerous focus. The realization of my deception infuriated him, but the obsession that had taken root over the past few days couldn't be erased. Even if his mind knew I was a stranger, his body was already thoroughly addicted to me. The clash inside his head was driving him to the brink of madness, and the only way he knew how to resolve it was through absolute domination. You think you can handle my punishment? He whispered, his teeth bearing a cruel smile. He didn't wait for an answer. Jinya gripped my arms, pinning them firmly to the bed. His touch was rough, devoid of the gentle reverence from the night before. This was an overlord reasserting his power over an intruder. He lowered his head, his lips grazing sharply against the skin of my shoulder. I let out a loud gasp, an intense rush of heat flaring through my lower belly. He wasn't holding back, marking me not as a beloved partner, but as a captured prize. If you want to play the husband, Jinya growled against my skin, his fingers digging into my hips with a force that would leave dark marks by morning. Then you will take everything I am. I will break you until you can't lie to me again. He shifted his weight, forcing my body flat against the mattress, his movements harsh and unyielding. He pulled me close, trapping my hips against his groin as he reasserted his absolute dominance over me. I let out a sharp, ragged breath as he claimed me, pressing his entire weight down on my frame. The intensity of his possession was blinding, making my vision go dark for a split second, but right behind it came a wave of overwhelming emotion that made my body tremble. He didn't give me time to adjust. Jinya began to hold me with a strength that shook my entire being, wrapping me in a fierce, unyielding embrace with every powerful movement of his body. My head tossed back against the pillows, loud, broken gasps tearing from my throat as I held onto him frantically, overwhelmed by his heat and strength. Look at me, he commanded, his voice a dark, gravelly rumble as he stared down at my tear-stained face. He accelerated his pace, his hold becoming tighter and unforgiving, locking us together until his chest slammed hard against mine. I took the intensity willingly, opening myself to his fury. I tightened my arms around his neck, taking every hard, punishing movement of his body, letting him see my absolute submission as he dominated my space, hoping that this surrender would anchor his chaotic heart to mine before the innocent man disappeared forever. Chapter 7. The morning light offered no comfort when it finally crept through the gaps in the curtains. I woke up with my body aching in places I didn't know could hurt. True to his word, Genia had taken everything he wanted, holding me close until his anger turned into exhaustion. My skin was sensitive and marked from his tight grip, and my whole frame throbbed with a dull heat from the sheer intensity of his embrace. When I turned my head, Genia was already awake, sitting on the side of the bed with his back to me. His shoulders were tense. "Genia," I called out, making my voice sound soft, fragile, and laced with sleep. He turned to look at me. His gaze was terrifyingly cold, the exact expression of the ruthless overlord who had pinned me hours ago. But as I watched him, his expression suddenly shifted. The icy glare vanished, replaced by that familiar, wide-eyed look of absolute confusion. "Yuan," he whispered, reaching out to touch my face. His hand was trembling. "My head, it hurt so bad last night. I had horrible dreams. Did I hurt you? Please tell me I didn't hurt my husband." I stared into his eyes, my mind racing. Ding. Warning. The target has fully regained his original memories. He knows exactly who he is, and he knows you are an uninvited stranger. He is currently pretending to still have amnesia to test your loyalty and see what your true motives are. A chill ran down my spine, but I didn't let a single flicker of panic show on my face. A normal person would have fled, terrified of the trap, but I was bound by the system. If he wanted to play a game of cat and mouse, I would give him exactly what he wanted. He wanted to see if I was a deceitful fraud? Fine. I would become the most captivating, unwavering partner he had ever encountered. I would drive him so wild with focus that his cold intellect wouldn't mean a thing. "You didn't hurt me, Genia," I murmured, leaning my face into his palm and kissing his fingers. I shifted slightly under the covers, letting him see the marks he had left on my skin. "You were just a little rougher than usual, but I want to be close to you." I saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. It was barely noticeable, but it was there. The repressed, furious man inside him was reacting because I was leaning into his innocent facade to stay near him. "We have to go to the office today," Genia said, his voice perfectly mimicking his lost, dependent tone. "Lin Xiao called a board meeting. He says I must prove I can still run the company. Will you stay close to me, Yuan? I'm scared without you. I will never leave your side," I promised, giving him a brilliant, adoring smile. 2 hours later, we were sitting in the sleek, glass-walled boardroom at the GU Group headquarters. The room was packed with older executives, all of them dressed in dark suits. Lin Xiao sat at the opposite end of the long conference table, a confident, smug grin on his face. He was currently going through a slideshow, pointing out discrepancies in the shipping logs, and trying to convince the board that Genia's recent accident had left him mentally incompetent to handle the company's assets. Genia sat at the head of the table. To the board, he looked like his usual, stoic self. Silent, cold, and unreadable. To me, I knew he was executing a flawless performance, pretending to be a blank slate, while secretly calculating exactly how to handle his cousin. I was sitting right next to him, supposedly there to offer emotional support to my recovering husband. The table was long, covered in dark polished wood, and a linen tablecloth hung down almost to the floor, blocking the view of anyone's legs from the waist down. As Lin Zhao's drone of a voice filled the room, I decided it was time to play with fire. I shifted my chair just an inch closer to Genia. Slowly, deliberately, I moved beneath the long table. The tablecloth fell back into place, hiding me entirely from the rest of the room, keeping me out of sight of the board. In the dim space under the table, I leaned close against his frame, my hands smoothing over his knees with agonizing slowness. I reached up, my fingers gripping the fabric of his trousers tightly, challenging his composure. Even while trying to maintain his stoic, amnesiac act in front of his board of directors, his body couldn't lie. I could feel the sudden, intense rigidity in his posture, his muscles locking tight as he fought to keep his breathing steady. Genia let out a breath through his nose, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the armrest of his chair above. I smirked internally. I leaned in closer, my hands sliding up his thighs to grip his waist firmly, anchoring myself directly between his knees. I looked up. From this angle, I could see the bottom of Genia's jaw. It was clenched so tight the bone looked ready to break through his skin. He was enduring a sweet, intense torment, forced to sit perfectly still while his board of directors debated his sanity. I held him with an absolute, unyielding grip, my fingers pressing firmly into his skin through his tailored suit, refusing to let him draw away. I leaned up, my lips brushing against the inner fabric of his trousers, right where his thigh met his waist. "Do you like your husband's touch, Genia?" I whispered against his skin, my voice too quiet for anyone else to hear. "Or should I stop?" As you can see from the third quarter data, Lin Zhao's voice echoed from symbols on the screen above. The shipping anomalies began right around the time Gu took his leave. Directly beneath him, I shifted my weight, my chest pressing firmly against his legs as I pulled his frame even closer to mine. Genia let out a sharp, choked gasp that cut right through Lin Zhao's sentence. "Is something wrong, Gu?" one of the elderly board members asked, turning to look at him. Genia cleared his throat, his voice tight, strained, and incredibly. "Nothing. Continue, Director Chun." Down below, I tightened my hold around his waist, using my touch to keep him entirely centered on me, feeling the heavy, ragged pulse of his heart vibrating down through his body. He was pushed to his absolute limit. I could feel his thighs shaking against my shoulders, his hips shifting forward just a fraction as he fought against the overwhelming intensity of our proximity. He was furious, focused, and locked in place. He wanted to drag me out from under the table, but his pride and his desire to maintain his act kept him pinned to the chair. In response, Genia's hand blindly reached down beneath the edge of the table. His long fingers grabbed a firm fistful of my hair, digging in with a savage, warning grip. He held my head steady, pressing me flush against his lap in a sharp, unyielding hold, forcing me to feel the full, intense heat of his strength while the board continued to vote on his life. Chapter 8. The board meeting felt like it dragged on for hours, but the moment the executives filed out of the room, Genia adjusted his suit jacket and walked out without saying a single word to me. He had to play his part, and I had to play mine. He left for an emergency meeting with the logistics managers on the lower floors, leaving me to wait in his private executive suite. It didn't take long for Lin Zhao to make his move. 10 minutes after Genia left, a secretary brought in a tray with a crystal glass filled with amber liquor. "Compliments of Master Lin Zhao," she said quickly before bowing and leaving. I stared at the amber liquid. Ding. Plot alert. The drink contains a concentrated dose of a highly potent, illicit fever-inducing agent. Lin Zhao intended for Gu Genia to drink this, lose all cognitive control, and be caught in a compromising situation with a hired actress waiting down the hall to capture it on camera and destroy his reputation permanently. If Genia drank this, his facade would shatter, and the operation would fail. My survival meter would plunge. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the glass and downed the entire thing in 3 gulps. It tasted sweet, burning a trail right down my throat. The effect was nearly instantaneous. Within 5 minutes, a terrifying wave of heat exploded from the core of my stomach, radiating straight through my entire body. My skin began to flush a crimson, and a high fever took over, making my vision blur and tilt. My heart pounded erratically against my ribs. I stumbled toward the private resting room connected to Genia's office, locking the door behind me. The heat was agonizing. I stripped off my heavy formal layers, kicking them away until I collapsed onto the leather lounge bed. I couldn't stop shivering despite the sweat slicking my skin. I needed something, anything, to anchor me. My hands found Genia's spare suit jacket resting on a nearby chair, the fabric still carrying his distinct scent of cologne and clean skin. I pulled the dark jacket to my chest, curling myself around it, burying my face into the lapel while my senses swirled with an uncontainable, desperate restlessness. "Oh, Genia," I whimpered out loud, my voice broken. The fever was mutating inside my veins, leaving me feeling hollow and desperately craving his real physical presence until I was crying into the silk lining of his suit jacket. The door handle rattled suddenly. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. Genia stepped into the room, his expression cold and calculating, ready to continue his amnesiac interrogation. But the moment his eyes landed on me, his entire ruthless facade shattered. I was curled on the bed, my skin bright pink and dripping with sweat, clutching his tailored suit jacket like a lifeline. I was panting, my eyes unfocused, lost in a feverish delusion. "Yuan," Genia voiced, stripping away every single ounce of his fake innocence. The sheer panic in his tone was real. He slammed the door shut behind him and lunged toward the bed, grabbing my trembling hands to pull them away from my face. "What did you do? What is wrong with you?" "Hot. Genia, I'm so hot," I cried out, my body shifting blindly against his touch. I didn't care that he knew I was a fraud anymore. I just wanted him to anchor me. "Stay with me. Please, make the burning stop." Seeing me overwhelmed by the drug, wrapped in his clothes and begging for his presence, blew a fuse in Genia's mind. The realization of how he had actually fallen for his beautiful, deceitful partner. He didn't care who I was, where I came from, or what lies I had told. Right now, he just needed to claim the creature that was holding onto his coat. He didn't waste another second. Jinya pulled me tightly against his chest, dragging my frame to the center of the lounge bed, locking his arms around me with absolute force. The proximity was blinding. The fever turned his touch into an explosive, intense comfort that made my whole body convulse. I clung to him like a vice, matching his fierce, desperate grip as a low, animalistic growl escaped his throat. He began to hold me with a savagery, tearing through any sense of restraint. The leather lounge bed creaked loudly under the impact of our shifting weight. He held me over and over, his chest slamming against mine with a wet, bruising rhythm. Every time he locked his arms around me, it sent violent shocks of adrenaline straight through my system until I was breathless in the quiet office. Jinya, more, hold me tighter, don't let go. I sobbed, my hands clawing at his back, tearing his shirt as I begged for more of his brutal weight. Jinya growled, his hands gripping my waist so tightly his fingers left immediate imprints on my skin. He accelerated his pace, his movements becoming a chaotic, unbridled blur of speed and power. He was drawing me into his space, his hot breath panting against my ear as he entirely dominated the room. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your name is. You belong to me, Yuan. You are entirely mine. The room was filled with the sounds of our rapid breathing, my high-pitched, drug-fueled wails, and Jinya's grunts. He shifted his grip, turning me close against him and pinning my face down into his suit jacket. He held me tightly from behind, hitting my senses with an intensity so deep it made my vision go entirely white. I couldn't hold back anymore. Driven to the absolute brink by the fever and his relentless, punishing embrace, my entire body spasmed, trembling violently against the dark fabric of his jacket. Right as the tension broke, Jinya let out a final, roaring groan. He delivered one last, devastatingly tight squeeze, burying his face in my neck with a force that made my whole body shake before his pulse pulsed violently against mine, locking us together in the deepest part of the night. We collapsed against each other on the lounge bed, spent, our sweat-slicked bodies trembling as the exposure of what we had just done hung in the quiet room. Chapter 9. The office resting room was deathly quiet, the air thick with the heavy tension of the afternoon. Jinya stayed close against me for a long time, keeping his arms securely wrapped around my waist to trap me beneath his powerful frame. His chest rose and fell heavily against my back, his face pressed into the nape of my neck. Slowly, the fog of the fever began to recede from my brain, leaving behind an exhausted clarity. My whole body felt wrecked. My thighs were trembling, and my pulse throbbed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Jinya shifted, turning me over to face him as his hold loosened slightly, making me let out a soft sigh from the sudden draft against my skin. He didn't say a word at first. Instead, he grabbed my shoulder, anchoring me firmly to the mattress so he could look into my eyes. The wide-eyed, innocent act was entirely gone. His eyes were cold, sharp, and intensely focused. "What happened, Yuan?" he asked, his voice low and demanding, stripping away any pretense of his amnesia. "Why did I find you in that state? Why were you hurting yourself in here?" I looked up at him, my eyes still watery from the intense physical exhaustion. My mind worked quickly, filtering through the data. I couldn't tell him about the system, or that Lin Xiao had hired an actress to record him losing control. I had to keep the truth simple, blending it with a lie to protect my position. A secretary brought in a tray. I whispered, my voice sounding weak and breathless against the pillows. "She said a drink was sent by Lin Xiao for you. I didn't want you touching anything from him, so I took the glass. I drank it without thinking it would have any effect on me. I thought it was just regular liquor." I paused, letting out a soft, shaky breath as I watched his face darken. But right after I finished drinking it, my whole body felt weird. The heat just exploded inside me, and I couldn't control myself. "I came back here because I didn't want anyone to see me like that. I didn't know it would be that strong, Jinya." Jinya's jaw tightened until the bone looked ready to snap. The realization that I had blindly swallowed a toxic trap meant for him shattered the rest of his intellectual defenses. He didn't care about my mysterious origins anymore. The fact that I had put myself in danger to shield him from his cousin's plot drove his nature to the brink of intensity. "You took a poison meant for me," Jinya muttered, his voice dropping into a dark, territorial growl. He lunged forward, pinning both of my wrists down against the mattress, his body locking me flat beneath him. "You really are a reckless, beautiful fool." He leaned down until his lips were brushing against my ear, his hot breath sending shivers straight through my body. "I remember everything, Yuan. I remember my life, my past, and my paranoia. I know exactly how cruel I am, and I know you don't belong in my past, but it doesn't matter anymore." He shifted his grip, one of his hands sliding down to pinch my chin tightly, forcing me to look straight into his dark eyes. If you ever think about running away from me after this, if you ever think about escaping this house, I will keep you so close that the world outside will never touch your skin again. I will keep you right here by my side, and you will never know anyone else's warmth but mine. A tear leaked out of the corner of my eye, but a small smile touched my lips. I didn't feel terrified. My survival meter was stable, and the intensity of his devotion was exactly what I needed to anchor him. I unwrapped my hands from his grip, sliding my arms up around his neck while my legs rose, wrapping tightly around his waist to pull his frame back against mine. Then hold on to me, Genia, I whispered through my tears, accepting the beautiful madness of his threat. I'm already trapped by you anyway. The utter surrender in my voice blew away the last of his restraint. Genia let out a low groan, his lips crashing onto mine in a kiss that tasted of salt and absolute possession. This time, there was no anger or confusion, just a reverent hunger that wanted to consume every part of me. He pulled me flush against his frame, his arms wrapping around me with an unyielding, tight pressure. He didn't waste time. His hold was already firm, his body radiating a furious heat as he pressed me tightly against his lap. You're going to stay right here with me today, Genia muttered against my mouth, his voice sending an immediate spike of adrenaline through my veins. I'm going to hold you so close until you forget how to speak anyone else's name but mine. He drew me into his embrace with a slow, unyielding push. I let out a choked cry, my fingers digging into his shoulders, my body trembling as the sheer weight of him held me secure. He began to move in a deliberate, intense rhythm, holding me flush against his chest before tightening his grip to pull me even closer. Genia leaned down, his lips pressing sharply into the sensitive skin of my neck, leaving a mark that would take weeks to fade, sealing our beautiful, intense bond right there in the quiet office. Every hard movement of his body drove me into a daze of pure comfort, our breaths mixing together in the dark as we drowned in each other's touch. Chapter 10. We spent the next week sealed away in our twisted little paradise. Every night, Genia used his presence to remind me exactly who I belonged to, holding me so close until I was thoroughly accustomed to his heavy embrace. I grew to love the weight of him, the fierce promises he whispered while locking me in his arms, and the dark, unfiltered devotion that kept us bound together. But the peace didn't last. On a Tuesday morning, a sharp chime fractured the quiet of the executive office. Ding! Urgent plot update. Song ran, the white light, has betrayed the host timeline. Working with Lin Xiao, he has leaked Genia's psychiatric and neurological records from the crash to the public media. The Gu Group stock is currently in a free fall, dropping 15% in the last 30 minutes. A live press conference has been called downstairs to demand Genia's resignation. Genia stood by his desk, looking at the tablet as the red stock tickers blinked rapidly. His eyes grew entirely devoid of warmth, returning to that monstrous, calculating persona that used to terrify the entire city. He looked over at me, his jaw clenched, expecting me to shrink away from the malice radiating off his body as he prepared to go to war. They think they can use my broken mind to ruin me, Genia said, his voice entirely flat and dangerous. I will systematically destroy the Song family by sunset, Yuan. I will leave them with nothing. If that frightens you, stay in the lounge. I didn't shrink back. I walked right up to him, a sharp smirk spreading across my face. Why would I be frightened? They tried to ruin my husband. Let's break them. System, I commanded in my mind. Spend 500 survival points. Intercept the media servers. Replace those leaked medical records with the encrypted files detailing Lin Xiao's shipping fraud and Song Rant's insider trading logs. Ding. Processing. 500 points deducted. Reality override successful. The files have been swapped on all major press databases. The media downstairs is about to receive a very different story. I looked up at Genia, showing him the tablet as the news alerts suddenly shifted from his amnesia to his cousin's criminal activities. You're a partner, Genia, not just a pet owner. I've already countered the leak. Genia stared at the screen, then looked down at me, his eyes blazing with a wild, adrenaline-fueled shock. He blinked, the cold ruthlessness in his eyes momentarily fracturing into pure disbelief. He was just about to call his legal team and unleash an army of lawyers to tie the press down in litigation, but I had bypassed the entire corporate war machine in a matter of seconds. How did you do this? Genia asked, his voice rough as he stepped closer, his fingers gripping my chin to force me to look at him. Yuan, tell me what you did. How did you maneuver this case? No one has access to those press databases without high-level clearance. Tell me your secrets. I merely smirked, leaning slightly into his touch while looking up at him through my eyelashes. I have my ways, Genia. You aren't the only one in this city with high-level connections. I have my own way of doing things, and I don't need a courtroom to handle snakes. I tapped the screen of the tablet, pointing at the live broadcast. All that matters right now is that Lin Xiao is being exposed on national television, and the Gu Group stock is steadily rising back up. The crisis is over. The thrill of our combined malice, wrapped in the shock of my mysterious competence, blew a fuse in his mind. The thrill of our partnership turned into an immediate, explosive wave of intensity. He didn't say another word. He grabbed my waist, lifting me off my feet, and marched straight toward the floor-to-ceiling glass windows that overlooked the entire city. Yuan, you brilliant, dangerous partner, Genia rumbled, his voice thick with a sudden, roaring focus. He pressed my front against the cold glass window. Below us, the city streets were buzzing, and the press cars were lined up right outside the building lobby, just 20 floors down. Anyone looking up with binoculars could see the outline of our bodies, but the danger only made my blood run hot. Genia pulled me close, trapping my hips against his frame and locking me firmly against the glass. He held me with a frantic grip, his body radiating an intense heat from the adrenaline. He simply grabbed my waist, pulling me back into his groin, reasserting his absolute possession. With one brutal, desperate movement, Genia pressed his entire weight against me. NGHHH. I gasped, my forehead resting against the cool glass as his powerful frame anchored me flat against the window. He took over my space instantly, his strong arms clamping down around me with a fierce, unyielding hold. The view of the city tilted before my eyes as Genia gripped my hair gently but firmly, forcing my head up so I looked at the streets below while he held me trapped. He began to hold me with a fast, unbridled savagery. The glass rattled against its frame with every sudden shift of his hips. He wasn't holding back. The upcoming press conference meant we only had minutes, and the time constraint turned our proximity into a feral, chaotic race for release. Look down there, Genia growled in my ear, his breath hot and ragged as his chest pressed heavily against my back. Watch the world turn while you stay right in your husband's grip. Tell me who rules this city, Yuan. Tell me who owns your complete devotion. You Genia, you do. I gasped, my hands pressing against the glass for balance as his strong frame repeatedly locked me in place. Every heavy movement made my heart race, my breath catching against the window pane. I was entirely engulfed by the friction and the sheer size of his powerful frame. He didn't slow down. Driven by the adrenaline of the betrayal and the thrill of our partnership, Genia's movements became a fast, frantic blur. He held me with a punishing intensity, his chest slamming hard against my back. I'm right here, Yuan. Take it all, he choked out, his voice dropping into a guttural, primal grunt. He pulled me all the way against him, pinning my hips flat against the glass as he surrendered entirely to the emotion. A wave of intense heat shot directly through me, overwhelming my senses. At the exact same moment, my own breath caught, my body trembling violently against the glass window. Genia let out a long, ragged sigh, his chest heaving against my back as he kept me held tightly in his messy, breathless embrace, cementing our victory just minutes before we had to face the world. Chapter 11. The aftermath of the press conference was a corporate war zone. Lin Xiao was led away in handcuffs, and Song Rant's reputation was incinerated within hours. But as the external threats vanished, Genia's internal demons took their place. The realization that I was his greatest asset and his greatest vulnerability had twisted his focus into something suffocating. Instead of returning to the mansion, I found myself in a high-rise penthouse at the edge of the city. The doors were biometric, the windows were reinforced, and the guards at the elevator didn't answer to me. I was officially kept away from the world. I stood in the center of the lavish living room, staring at the locked balcony door. Ding. Status check. Affection meter, 100%, max. Freedom meter, 0%. Warning. If the freedom meter stays at 0 for more than 24 hours, the host will be flagged as a broken asset, and the mission will fail. The lock on the front door turned. Genia walked in, looking exhausted but strikingly handsome in his dark suit. He walked straight to me, wrapping his arms around my waist and burying his face in my hair. You're safe here, Yuan, he whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying, quiet intensity. No one can touch you. No one can send you drinks or look at you. It's just us. Forever. I didn't pull away. I leaned back into him, but I let my body go limp, my voice sounding hollow and devoid of its usual spark. Is this what forever looks like, Genia? A beautiful cage? He stiffened, his grip tightening. It's for your own good. I can't lose you. Then you've already lost me, I said, turning in his arms to look at him with tear-filled eyes. You have my physical presence, but you've locked my heart behind a door I can't open. If you don't trust me to live in your world, then you don't really love me. You just want to own me. The guilt hit him exactly where I wanted it to. I saw the flash of agony in his eyes, the conflict between his need to control and his need to be loved. I had to push him over the edge to show him that my presence was a gift, not something he could steal. I reached up, slowly undoing his silk tie, a deep, royal blue. I didn't take it off. I wrapped it loosely around my own wrists, crossing them in front of my chest, and held the ends out to him. If you're so afraid I'll leave, then bind me properly, I challenged, my voice a soft, intense provocation. Don't use locks and guards. Use yourself. Make me want to stay. Jinya's eyes darkened, with heat flooding his gaze. He grabbed the ends of the silk tie, pulling my hands close as he stepped forward. He led me toward the bedroom, his movements slow, deliberate, and entirely predatory. He drew me down onto the bed, using the soft fabric to firmly but gently anchor my hands against the headboard, keeping me centered under his gaze. He held me securely, trapping my frame beneath his massive weight under the warm glow of the chandelier. You want to be bound, Yuan? Jinya rasped, his eyes locked onto mine. I'll make sure you can't think of anything but the way I hold you close. He leaned over me, his hands sliding down to frame my waist. The atmosphere was charged, my heart hammering in anticipation. He didn't rush. He held me securely, his touch warm and firm against my skin, pinning me flat against the mattress until I was leaning entirely into his grip. Please, Jinya. I'm yours, just stay with me. I murmured, the utter submission in my voice breaking his restraint. He drew me into an embrace, his strong frame pressing flat against mine as he took over my space entirely. He didn't hesitate, aligning us so closely that there wasn't a breath of space left between our chests. NNGGH, you're so close. I gasped, my arms tightening around his neck as he held me flat against the bed. Jinya began to hold me with a steady, reverent rhythm. He leaned down, his chest crushing mine, his mouth whispering fierce vows against my lips. Every time I hold you like this, I'm locking the door. Every moment is a promise. You belong right here with me, Yuan. Say it. I belong to you. I breathed, my body trembling under the absolute weight of his focus, drawing his warmth into my core. He moved with a deliberate, intense friction that made every nerve ending tingle with an overwhelming rush of adrenaline. He was worshipping my presence while keeping me contained, a perfect balance of tenderness and dominant strength. As the emotion peaked, he loosened the tie from my wrists, pulling me up into a tight, seated position on his lap, while keeping his arms wrapped securely around my frame. I'll open the doors, he whispered, his voice broken as he reached his absolute limit. Just don't leave me. He tightened his embrace to the absolute maximum, his frame shaking against mine as he surrendered his control to me. I felt the hot rush of his pulse matching my own, his entire body relaxing against mine as the tension finally broke. I had shattered the cage, and in its place, I had built a throne. Chapter 12. The next morning, Jinya kept his promise. The guards at the elevator stepped aside, and the penthouse biometric locks were disabled. I walked out into the city air, my muscles stiff and my body highly sensitive from the intense, overwhelming closeness we had shared for hours during the night. Ding. Status update. Freedom meter, 75%. Affection meter, 100%, max. Host has successfully averted asset degradation. Jinya insisted on driving me himself to a quiet courtyard restaurant on the north side, away from the bus. He had softened, his gaze resting on me with an intense, vulnerable devotion. He was trying to prove he could let me fly without locking me away. We were walking back to his car through an open-air concrete plaza when the system chime erupted with a deafening screech inside my skull. Ding. Danger. Danger. Traitor remnant sniper detected on the adjacent clock tower rooftop. High-caliber bullet incoming. Target, Jinya. Trajectory, fatal. Time to impact, 1.5 seconds. My eyes went wide. System, activate evasion protocol. I screamed in my mind. Error. Host's physical parameters are currently hindered by severe fatigue and strain from the prolonged intensity of last night. Reaction time delayed by 0.8 seconds. Shit. My legs wouldn't move fast enough. The physical toll of our endless embrace had left my muscles sluggish. I couldn't pull him down in time. I couldn't draw a weapon. The only thing my body could manage was a clumsy, desperate lurch forward. I threw myself right in front of Jinya, just as a sharp, supersonic crack split the air. A force like a sledgehammer slammed directly into the center of my chest. The impact knocked the breath out of my lungs, spinning me around. I didn't feel the pain immediately. Just a numbing, freezing cold that bloomed outward from the entry wound, followed by the immediate, suffocating sensation of my lungs filling with liquid. Yuan. Jinya's voice sounded a shriek of absolute terror. Before my knees could hit the concrete, his hands caught me, dragging me down into his lap as he dropped to the ground. He hauled my body flush against his chest, his fingers frantically pressing down over the hole in my shirt where hot, dark blood was already pulsing out in steady, terrifying spurts. No, no, no. Yuan, look at me. Keep your eyes on me. Jinya sobbed, his entire body shaking violently. The calculating, unyielding monster had disintegrated. His face was stark white, tears streaming down his cheeks, mixing with the sweat on his forehead as he looked at the blood coating his palms. I'm fine. I choked out, but the words were cut off by a wet cough. A thick stream of crimson blood spilled past my lips, staining my chin and dripping onto his torn collar. The taste of copper was overwhelming, filling my mouth and burning my throat. Ding. Warning. Host vital signs are failing rapidly. Cardiac function at 40%. Internal hemorrhaging accelerating. Consciousness termination in 45 seconds. Jinya was losing his mind. He pressed his forehead against mine, his breath coming in ragged, hyperventilating gasps. Why did you do it? You stupid fool. I was supposed to protect you. I locked you up to keep you safe from this. Please, Yuan, don't close your eyes. I love you. I remember everything. I know you lied to me, but I don't care. I don't care about anything but you. Don't leave me in the dark again. The agonizing love he felt was laid bare in the middle of that concrete plaza. He didn't care about his empire, his enemies, or his secrets. He was just a man begging his entire universe not to fade away. I raised a trembling, blood-slicked hand, my fingers brushing weakly against his jawline. My vision was already fraying at the edges, turning into static, black tunnels. The physical sensation of my body shutting down was cold, but the heat of his skin against mine was the only thing keeping me anchored for a few more seconds. Don't cry. I whispered, my voice barely a raspy click in my throat. Jinya leaned down, his mouth crashing onto mine in a desperate, wet, and agonizingly emotional kiss. It wasn't a kiss of lust. It was a frantic attempt to pour his own life into my dying body. Our lips met through the thick, warm taste of copper and the salt of his unstoppable tears. He held my lips gently but firmly, his breath catching as he let out a broken, suffocating sob straight against my mouth, begging me to stay with every movement of his lips. I answered the kiss with the very last ounce of my strength, my fingers curling weakly into his hair, sealing our profound, beautiful bond with the taste of my own blood as my consciousness finally broke, and everything went black. Chapter 13. The absolute silence of the system space was suffocating after the chaotic noise of the concrete plaza. I woke up floating in a void of pure white, my chest whole, devoid of the agonizing coldness of the sniper bullet. My skin was smooth, free of the marks and strain that had painted my flesh for weeks. Ding. Host vital signs terminated in World 1. Core mission status, incomplete. Affection meter, 100%, max. Plot progression stalled due to unexpected death of vital asset. Preparing to wipe memory and transmigrate to World 2. Stop, I commanded, my voice echoing sharply in the empty space. System, pause initialization. I'm not leaving yet. Use my remaining survival points to open a visual link back to World 1. Let me look at him. Warning, opening a continuous temporal window costs 1,000 survival points. This will severely deplete your reserves for the next transmigration. Do you wish to proceed? Do it. I barked, my heart twisting with an unexpected ache. I couldn't just leave him behind after that final, desperate kiss. The white void split open, revealing a screen of absolute devastation. Jinya had lost his mind. The innocent husband who had clung to me in the bedroom was dead. The cautious man who navigated the boardroom was gone. Only a bloodthirsty, apocalyptic monster remained. Jinya had turned the entire city into a hunting ground. The rival triad was decimated within 48 hours, not just arrested, but systematically hunted down, their properties reduced to ash, their assets seized by the fury of the Gu family empire. On the screen, I watched him stand in an interrogation room, his expensive black suit covered in dust and strain that didn't belong to him. His eyes were dead, hollow, and pitch black, devoid of a single shred of human mercy as he brought down the empire of the man who had ordered the hit, demanding names until there was nothing left to extract. But it was what he did at night that shattered my soul. The screen shifted to the dark master bedroom of the mansion. Jinya had refused to let the world take me away. He had used his vast wealth to hire secret medical specialists, keeping my physical frame perfectly preserved, looking like I was merely asleep. My body lay in the center of the bed, dressed in the same soft sweater I had worn on our first morning together. Jinya walked into the room, stripping off his ruined jacket. He didn't look like a conqueror. He looked like a broken ghost. He crawled onto the mattress, his frame trembling as he slid beneath the silk covers beside my still form. He reached out, his hand sliding under my waist to pull me flush against his frame, burying his face directly into the crook of my neck. He lay there in the dark, his broad shoulders heaving as he wept silently against my skin, whispering my name over and over into the empty room. "System," I whispered, my eyes burning with phantom tears as I watched him grieve. "I can't let him destroy himself like this. Spend another 500 points. Project my spirit directly into his subconscious mind while he sleeps. Give him a phantom, metaphysical encounter. Let me soothe him. Ding. 500 points deducted. Initializing dream state projection. Connection stable. Time limit, 1 dream cycle." The white space dissolved, and I found myself standing in a dark, ethereal version of our bedroom. Jinya was there, pacing back and forth in a frantic, maddened daze, his hands clutching his head as the nightmares of my death tortured his mind. "Jinya," I called out softly. He froze. He spun around, his eyes widening as he saw my spirit standing before him. I was glowing with a soft, phantom light, open and vulnerable to him. "You on?" he breathed, his voice cracking with a devastating disbelief. He didn't care if it was an illusion or a trick of his broken brain. He lunged forward, his metaphysical body colliding with mine as he drew me down onto the dark bed of his mind. His touch in the dream space was electric, a soul-binding friction that bypassed the physical world entirely. He pinned my hands above my head, his grip tight, until I felt the phantom ache of his possession. His face was wild, wet with tears, his mouth crashing onto mine with a desperate, frantic hunger that tasted of grief and explosive intensity. "You're here," he growled against my lips, his hand sliding down to grip my frame, pulling me flush against him. "Even if I'm crazy, I'm never letting you go. I'll hold you until my soul breaks." He didn't waste a single moment. His entire presence was filled with an intense, supernatural heat that matched the fury of his mind. He pulled me close, trapping my hips against his groin, and drove his entire weight against my frame in one violent, remorseless movement. "Oh, Jinya," I gasped, my head tossing back against the pillows as his powerful frame anchored me to the absolute limits of the dream space. The sensation in this metaphysical world was amplified 10 times over, my entire being clamped down around his presence with a tight, unyielding hold that made him let out a guttural, animalistic roar. He began to hold me with a feral, primal power, his chest slamming against mine with an unbridled rhythm that shook the fabric of his subconscious. He locked me in his embrace over and over, hitting me with every brutal movement until my breath caught in my throat. "Look at me, Yuan," Jinya demanded, his fingers digging into my hips, leaving spiritual marks. He accelerated his movements, his hold becoming a frantic blur of speed and heat, keeping me locked tightly beneath him. "Tell me you're real. Tell me you're not going to vanish when I wake up." "I'm here, Jinya. I'm yours. Don't let go. Hold me to pieces," I sobbed, wrapping my arms tightly around his neck, taking every hard, punishing movement of his body. I was overwhelmed by the sheer size and heat of his powerful frame anchoring me flat against the bed. I opened myself to his fury, using our connection to absorb his agony, letting my body hold him tightly to comfort him. "Take everything. Fill my space." The room was filled with our emotional gasps and the heavy, rhythmic impact of our frames clashing together. Jinya shifted his grip, pulling my hands down to his chest, forcing me to feel the frantic hammering of his heart as he delivered a final embrace that locked us entirely together. "Yuan, I love you," he choked out, his voice cracking with absolute devotion as he held me with all his might. He stiffened, his body trembling violently as he surrendered to the emotion, a wave of intense heat shooting directly through my core, filling me to the absolute brim. At the exact same moment, my own breath caught, my body trembling violently against his chest as we locked lips in one final, heartbreakingly beautiful kiss, our souls binding together in the dark before the dream began to fade. "Wait for me," I whispered as the dream began to dissolve. "I'm coming back for you, Jinya. I promise." I was pulled back into the white void, leaving the man sleeping with a single, peaceful tear on his cheek, the memory of my touch the only thing keeping his soul from shattering entirely. Chapter 14. The white void snapped back around me, cold and clinical, but the echo of Jinya's heartbeat still vibrated in my soul. My hands were empty. The sensation of his skin and the memory of the profound intensity we shared in the dream space were fading into data logs. Ding. Dream projection complete. Time limit reached. Resuming transmigration protocol. Commencing memory wipe for World 2 in 5, 4. Cancel it. I roared, my voice fracturing the sterile quiet of the system hub. System, abort transmigration. I am not moving to the next world. I am going back to World 1. Error. Host request contradicts core programming. Your physical vessel in World 1 has suffered complete cardiovascular cessation. Revival is impossible under standard parameters. Memory wipe will now proceed. I said stop. I slammed my fist against the invisible barrier of the system interface. Panic, sharp and real, pierced through my mind. I couldn't leave him like that. Sleeping beside my preserved form, spending his days tearing through his enemies just to drown his grief. Check my data logs. Look at the affection meter. It's maxed out. I conquered the target. There has to be an emergency clause. Ding. Analyzing request. Data verified. Target affection meter, 100%, max. Divine devotion unlocked. However, host body preservation is temporary. To initiate a soul rebound and biological reconstruction, host must trade all accumulated survival points and accept permanent soul degradation penalties. Warning, this will leave you vulnerable in future worlds. Take the points. Take all of them. I said without a single second of hesitation. I didn't care about future worlds. I didn't care about the safety of my next missions. My mind was entirely consumed by the yearning to feel Jinye's real, physical arms around me again, to feel the weight of his body anchoring mine to reality. Confirming transaction, 5,000 survival points deducted. Initializing reality glitch. Forcing biological reset of World 1 vessel. Warning, host will experience severe sensory feedback during cell reconstruction. The white void suddenly fractured. Strips of red error code began to bleed through the clean light, a system glitch tearing through the matrix as my sheer willpower forced the universe to bend. The air became thick with static electricity, a heavy tension building as the system forced my soul back down the temporal line, dragging me back toward the physical plane. The anticipation of my return was an agonizing, breathless torment. Lying in that digital suspension, my mind flooded with the memory of the warmth of Jinye's skin, the rough, territorial grip of his fingers on my waist, and the absolute safety of his unyielding embrace. I wanted the weight of his hold. I wanted the suffocating intensity of his devotion because it meant he was alive, and he was mine. Wait for me, Jinye, I thought desperately as the code began to wrap around my spirit like burning wires. Just hold on for a few more seconds. The sensory feedback hit me instantly. My lungs, which had been empty and cold for days, suddenly sparked with a violent, white-hot heat as the system reconstructed the ruptured tissues from the bullet wound. The blood in my veins began to pump again, thick and hot, forcing my heart to hammer against my ribs in a frantic, erratic rhythm. Every nerve ending in my body woke up at once, screaming with a sharp, electric sensitivity. The phantom memory of our connection seemed to materialize in my physical flesh, leaving me restless, craving his real, physical presence to fill the cold void. Ding. Glitch execution at 90%. Re-entering World 1 timeline. Preparing to open host eyes in 3, 2, 1. The darkness cracked. Air tore into my lungs with a sharp, burning gasp, expanding the newly reconstructed tissue of my chest. I opened my eyes to the familiar, dim shadows of the mansion's master bedroom. The smell of the room hit me instantly, cold silk, stale tears, and the faint scent of copper. Beside me, a click broke the quiet. I turned my head slowly, my neck stiff. Jinye was sitting on the edge of the mattress, his back bent, looking entirely broken. His clothes were rumpled, his hair messy. In his hand, he held a sleek, black handgun, the muzzle pressed directly against his own temple. His finger was already tightening on the trigger, his eyes closed as he prepared to end his own life, to follow me into the dark. I didn't think. I forced my trembling arm out from beneath the covers and reached out. My hand, warm and pulsing with fresh blood, slammed over his knuckles, locking the gun in place. Jinye froze. His eyes snapped open, his pupils shrinking as he slowly turned his head to look down at me. The absolute shock on his face turned into disbelief. "Yuan?" He choked out, his voice a broken whisper. He dropped the gun onto the carpet, the weapon clattering uselessly away. He reached out with both hands, his fingers hovering just millimeters above my skin, terrified that I was just another hallucination from his ruined mind. You're breathing. You're warm. I'm back, Jinye. I rasped, my throat dry as sandpaper, but my eyes were blazing with real life. I told you to wait for me. Jinye broke down. The ruthless, bloodthirsty tyrant collapsed over my body, burying his face directly into the crook of my neck. Uncontrollable, racking sobs tore through his chest, his hot tears soaking my collarbone as he clutched me so tightly my ribs ached. He kissed every inch of my skin, his mouth frantic, wet, and desperate, confirming over and over that I was truly alive. Ding. Target fully conquered. Affection meter, 100%, permanent. System constraints dissolved. Soul bond permanent. Host has successfully dominated World 1. The electronic voice faded into absolute silence, tuned out as Genia pulled back, his dark eyes burning with an explosive, wild intensity born from the depths of his despair. The relief turned into a primal, unbridled hunger. I don't care how you're alive, Genia growled, his hands gripping the front of my sweater and ripping it down the middle, scattering the buttons across the bed. I'm never letting you out of my sight again, Yuan. I'm going to hold you so close you'll never be able to leave this bed again. Do it, I demanded, my own desire flaring into a feverish heat, my whole body aching with a hollow emptiness that only his presence could cure. Claim me, Genia. Make me feel every single bit of your warmth. He didn't waste a second. Genia drew me flush against his frame, his body radiating a furious, unyielding heat. He grabbed my waist, pulling me securely to the center of the mattress, enveloping me entirely within his massive weight. The proximity was blinding. I let out a sharp gasp, my head tossing back against the pillows as his powerful frame anchored me flat against the bed. The contact was intense, a sharp wave of pure relief and pleasure that made my whole body tremble. My arms wrapped tightly around his neck, holding him close as Genia let out a guttural, emotional roar. He began to hold me with a primal power, his face flushing as his chest pressed heavily against mine. The headboard rattled against the wall with every heavy shift of his body. He wasn't holding back. Every single touch was a reassurance of life, an oath of loyalty that shook my entire frame. You're mine, he growled in my ear, his breath hot and ragged as his chest slammed firmly against mine. Tell me who you belong to, Yuan. Tell me who owns your complete devotion. You are, Genia. Only you, I wailed, my fingers clawing at his back, leaving red marks across his shoulders as his powerful frame repeatedly pressed right against mine. Every movement made my heart race, engulfed by his size and the intense heat of his embrace. Tell me you're mine, he demanded, his fingers digging into my hips, marking the fresh, warm skin. Tell me you're never leaving. I'm yours. Only yours. I wailed, my fingers catching his shoulders as he shifted his weight. He flipped me over, pulling me onto my hands and knees. He held my waist firmly, keeping me anchored from behind, the angle allowing him to hold me securely against his chest. I watched our shadows on the wall, the messy, beautiful sight of him claiming my space over and over. Every movement was an oath of loyalty, every gasp a reassurance of life. The room was filled with the sounds of our unbridled emotion, the heavy breathing, the emotional moans, and the words that Genia poured into my ear. He was relentless, holding me tightly until I was weeping from the sheer intensity of the relief. I'm going to hold you so close you'll never feel empty again, he growled, his movements becoming a frantic blur. I reached my limit, my body trembling violently against the silk sheets as I clamped down tightly around his frame. He tightened his embrace to the absolute maximum, his chest hitting my back with a force that made my whole body shake. He buried his face into my neck and held me still, his entire frame shuddering as he surrendered to the overwhelming warmth between us. He collapsed on top of me, his strong arms still keeping me safely locked in his hold, his heart beating in sync with mine. We lay there in the ruins of the cage he had built, two souls finally, irrevocably bound together. The dawn was breaking outside, but in here, the only world that mattered was the one we had built with our bodies. The end.